Okay, today we pause for a moment in a world that rarely stops. The constant rush of notifications, deadlines, and voices around us creates an illusion that life is only meaningful when we run faster. Yet beneath this noise, a question emerges with quiet persistence. Can we truly understand the vastness of the world if we have not first understood ourselves? Welcome to Stoic Dhamma, a space where ancient wisdom meets modern reflection. Here we explore Stoic philosophy, daily mindfulness, and timeless insights that guide us toward clarity and calm narration. In today's journey, we return to a message whispered across centuries. Before trying to hold the world in your hands, you must first see clearly the landscape within your own mind and heart. Only then can the world outside reveal its true shape. In the heart of Stoic philosophy lies a conviction both simple and profound. The path to wisdom begins not with conquering empires, nor with mastering external knowledge, but with the quiet and often uncomfortable act of knowing yourself. It is here, within the mind, that all journeys truly start. The Stoics taught that life's storms are not determined by the winds outside, but by the sails we set within. If we do not know the strength of our own vessel, the currents of the world will carry us endlessly, and we will mistake motion for direction. Consider how often we chase goals without pausing to ask whether they reflect our true desires or merely echoes of the crowd. Social expectations, cultural noise, and the shadows of comparison blur our sense of purpose until we are living someone else's story. Self-knowledge is the compass that allows us to distinguish between what is genuinely ours and what is borrowed from the world. Without it, we may achieve much but still feel empty, because our victories belong to an identity we never chose. Seneca reminded us that it is not the length of life but its quality that matters. Yet how can we measure quality if we do not first define what a meaningful life looks like to us? The unexamined life becomes a long road without a destination. Imagine standing before a mirror, not of glass but of conscience. Every decision, every habit, every fear reflected back to you. To face this mirror is daunting, for it reveals not only strengths, but also the illusions we hold about ourselves. But there is freedom in this confrontation. When we see ourselves clearly, without distortion, we also see the choices available. We no longer act from compulsion or fear of judgment, but from alignment with what is essential. Marcus Aurelius, ruling the vast Roman Empire, wrote not about wealth or power, but about the constant work of disciplining his thoughts. His journals reveal a man more concerned with clarity of soul than with glory of throne. If a man surrounded by armies, politics, and endless pressures found the need to return daily to self-reflection, what does that say about the rest of us? The true battlefield is often not outside, but within the restless corridors of the mind. Self-knowledge also teaches humility. To know oneself deeply is to recognize limits. We are finite, fragile, and often misguided by passions. Epictetus taught that wisdom begins by separating what is in our control from what is not. Without self-awareness, this distinction is impossible. We rage against events we cannot change. We cling to outcomes beyond our reach, and we neglect the one realm always within our power, the governance of our own thoughts. There is another reason self-knowledge matters. It anchors resilience. When adversity arrives, as it always does, those who know themselves stand rooted. They may bend but do not break, because their identity is not tied to external fortune. History offers countless examples. Some crumble under success as easily as others collapse under failure. Yet the ones who endure are those who have mapped their inner landscape and discovered a ground deeper than circumstance. Without self-knowledge, ambition is blind. We climb ladders only to find they lean against the wrong wall. We gather possessions that bring no peace. We follow careers or relationships shaped by expectation rather than authenticity. But with self-knowledge, even the simplest path shines with meaning. A quiet life lived in harmony with one's nature carries more fulfillment than a grand life lived in contradiction. Wisdom is not about more, but about enough. The question then is unavoidable. If you do not know what you truly want, can you live a life that is truly yours? The Stoics would answer no. To be ignorant of yourself is to be a stranger in your own home. From here, we can begin to see why the ancient philosophers placed such weight on daily self-examination. For them, philosophy was not theory but practice, a constant turning inward so that one might live outwardly with integrity. Self-knowledge is not discovered in a single revelation but cultivated over time. Each day becomes an opportunity to ask, why do I act this way? What do I fear? What do I truly value? These questions carve pathways toward clarity. Modern life, though filled with technology and speed, still mirrors ancient struggles. The distraction of endless feeds and opinions is no different from the Roman marketplace. In both, the danger is losing ourselves in the noise. By turning again to the wisdom of Stoicism, we recover a timeless tool for discernment. It reminds us to slow down, to pause amid the noise, and to separate what truly matters from what merely distracts. Through this practice, we begin to shape a life anchored not in appearances or fleeting desires, but in the enduring essence of who we are. This, at its core, is the quiet strength of self-knowledge. Knowing yourself does not mean isolating from the world, but engaging with it from a place of centeredness. The storms remain, but the sailor who knows the shape of their vessel navigates with greater peace. The sea has not changed, but the voyage has. So we arrive at the quiet heart of this reflection. True wisdom begins with self-knowledge. Without it, we drift through life like travelers without a map, mistaking motion for direction and success for meaning. To know yourself is to plant your feet on solid ground, to discover a compass that no storm can erase. It is the soil from which all virtues take root: courage, justice, moderation, and wisdom. Every philosophy, however vast, collapses if it does not rest on this foundation. When we fail to look inward, we wander as strangers in our own lives, carried by the noise of others. But when we return to ourselves with honesty, we find a home that no circumstance can take away. Self-knowledge does not end the journey. It begins it, turning each step into a path chosen rather than a path inherited. Stoic philosophy was born in the crowded porticos of ancient Athens, where merchants, travelers, and thinkers gathered under painted colonnades. From there, it traveled to Rome, where emperors, statesmen, and ordinary citizens alike carried its teachings into their daily struggles. Across centuries, one theme echoed clearly: self-knowledge is the cornerstone of wisdom. The Stoics believed the human mind holds the power to shape how we experience life. While external events may be chaotic and unpredictable, the inner world can remain steady if guided by reason. This emphasis on rational clarity and inner mastery defined their approach to philosophy as more than theory. It was a way of living. Epictetus, once a slave, taught that true freedom arises not from circumstance, but from the mastery of one's own mind. He reminded his students that the heaviest chains are often invisible: our desires, fears, and attachments. To know the self is to draw a clear boundary between what we can change and what we must learn to accept. Without such awareness, we waste our strength resisting fate, raging against the tide instead of learning to navigate its current. By accepting limits, Epictetus revealed a paradoxical freedom: the power to act wisely where action is possible, and to release what lies beyond our grasp. Seneca, surrounded by wealth, politics, and danger, spoke of the mind as a sacred refuge. For him, self-knowledge was the art of turning inward, retreating into clarity, when the world grew loud with ambition and unrest. His letters describe how each day should close with reflection, a self-audit, asking whether he had lived with intention or surrendered to unworthy impulses. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, carried this same discipline, turning his nights into a dialogue with himself. His meditations were not written for an audience, but for his own guidance. Line after line, he reminded himself to act justly, to remain humble, and to correct the errors of his own thinking. His empire was vast, yet his true labor was governing his mind. Together, these three voices illustrate different dimensions of Stoic wisdom. Epictetus teaches the limits of control. Seneca offers the mind as sanctuary. Marcus Aurelius shows the daily practice of honest self-examination. Each points back to the same foundation: Without knowing oneself, philosophy collapses into empty words. This foundation mattered because the Stoics did not seek abstract speculation, but practical resilience. They lived in a world of wars, plagues, and political instability. Their philosophy was forged in fire, not in comfort. To survive with dignity, they believed, one must cultivate inner clarity stronger than circumstance. The emphasis on rationality was not cold detachment, but a way of aligning with nature's order. The Stoics saw the universe as governed by reason, and to live wisely was to bring our inner life into harmony with that order. Self-knowledge was the first step in this alignment, for without knowing the self, we cannot know our place in the whole. Self-knowledge in Stoicism also carried a moral dimension. By understanding our desires, we learn to moderate them. By recognizing our fears, we confront them without surrender. By seeing our ego, we temper it with humility. In this way, self-knowledge becomes not only clarity, but also virtue. The historical context underscores this urgency. Ancient Rome was filled with temptations of wealth, power, and spectacle. Yet the Stoics stood apart, reminding citizens that no amount of external glory could replace the tranquility of a disciplined mind. In this, they were countercultural, offering an alternative to a society driven by conquest. Even today, their message resonates. We live not among gladiators but among algorithms and markets. Yet the principle remains. The world outside changes rapidly, while the task of knowing ourselves remains constant. Without this work, we are pulled by currents we neither chose nor understand. Stoicism insists that to be human is to be rational, and to be rational is to know oneself. This was not arrogance but humility, for the Stoics also recognized how easily the mind deceives itself. Thus, self-knowledge was not a destination, but a lifelong practice. Epictetus urged his students to remember their role as actors on a stage not of their own making. To know oneself was to know one's part, to play it with dignity whether brief or long, humble or noble. It was a call to authenticity within the script of fate. Seneca often reminded us of the fleeting nature of time. He observed how easily we lose life by failing to notice who we are and what truly matters. His counsel was to guard each hour with vigilance, to invest it in the cultivation of inner richness rather than being consumed by external distractions. Marcus Aurelius brought a cosmic perspective. By viewing himself as only a fragment of the vast universe, he reduced the weight of ego and placed his struggles in a larger order. For him, self-knowledge was not only understanding one's character, but also accepting one's smallness within the whole. Together, their voices converge into a timeless truth. Self-knowledge is not an ornament for the privileged, but a necessity for all. It is the ground from which justice, courage, moderation, and wisdom grow. Without it, we drift like ships without anchors, carried by impulse and illusion. This insight has echoed through the centuries. Christian theologians, modern psychologists, and even contemporary mindfulness teachers repeat the same principle. The inward journey is essential. In knowing ourselves, we also awaken compassion. For seeing our own flaws allows patience with others. Self-knowledge prepares us for life, society, and even death. So when we trace Stoicism from Athens to Rome, from Epictetus to Marcus Aurelius, we find a thread of wisdom unbroken. All philosophy begins with the self. The examination of the soul is the most enduring empire, one no war or plague can conquer. In conclusion, the Stoic foundations of self-knowledge remind us that wisdom is not inherited from the world, but cultivated within. It is the discipline of distinguishing control from chaos, the courage of retreating into the mind as refuge, and the humility of daily self-reflection. From this ground rises the possibility of a truly wise life. Philosophy becomes alive only when it steps beyond words and enters the rhythm of daily living. For the Stoics, self-knowledge was not a distant ideal, but a discipline woven into every choice, every reaction, and every quiet hour of the day. It was a practice of embodying wisdom rather than simply admiring it. To know yourself in daily life means to recognize your limits. The modern world celebrates boundless ambition, yet the Stoics invite us to acknowledge where our energy ends and where illusion begins. True strength comes not from denial of limits, but from working with them gracefully. By knowing your desires, you avoid chasing shadows. Many live in pursuit of goals they never examined, only to find emptiness at the summit. Self-knowledge asks, is this truly what you want, or is it only what you have been told to want? Such questions free you from the tyranny of imitation. Awareness of your reactions is equally vital. Anger, fear, and envy rise swiftly when provoked. But to observe these impulses as they emerge without immediately acting on them is to reclaim sovereignty over yourself. This is where theory transforms into strength of character. In the workplace, self-knowledge means knowing what distracts you and what keeps you grounded. Instead of being enslaved by endless tasks and shifting priorities, you learn to protect your focus, to concentrate on what aligns with your values, rather than scattering yourself across noise. In relationships, the practice deepens further. To know your emotional patterns is to avoid unnecessary conflict. You recognize when irritation belongs more to your inner unrest than to another person's actions. By understanding yourself, you bring patience to others. Within the inner life, self-knowledge becomes the gate to tranquility. Restlessness often comes not from the world, but from our hidden contradictions. When desires pull in one direction and values in another, the soul feels torn. Awareness reunites them, creating peace and alignment. The Stoics proposed daily exercises to nurture this awareness. One such practice was journaling. By writing each evening, they reviewed their actions, noted their failures, and set intentions for tomorrow. This was not punishment, but refinement, a way to sculpt the self day by day. Another exercise was meditation, not the emptying of the mind as in later traditions, but a directed contemplation. They reflected on mortality, on the brevity of life, and on the transience of fortune. These reminders brought clarity about what mattered and what did not. A more subtle Stoic discipline is the art of separating oneself from emotion. This does not mean suppressing feelings, but observing them as if from a distance. By stepping outside the immediate storm, you see the weather without becoming it, gaining perspective before acting. Imagine anger arriving like a sudden flame. Without awareness, it consumes your judgment. With practice, however, you notice its spark, acknowledge its presence, and choose whether to feed it. In this pause, self-knowledge turns into freedom. Modern psychology affirms what the Stoics already knew. Reflection reduces reactivity. By observing your thoughts, you slow the cycle of impulse and action. What once felt automatic becomes a choice. This is the power of mindful distance, cultivated through daily practice. Self-knowledge also means clarity about your priorities. In a culture of constant distraction, knowing what truly matters acts like a compass. It allows you to say no without guilt, to simplify without fear, and to invest your time in pursuits that nourish your soul. In moments of stress, returning to this compass is essential. When overwhelmed, the question becomes not, how can I do everything, but what aligns with my values now? This reframing transforms chaos into clarity, turning storms into navigable seas. The Stoics were not removed from daily responsibilities. Marcus Aurelius carried the weight of empire, Seneca managed politics and wealth, and Epictetus taught while living simply. Each showed that philosophy is not escape but engagement, made possible by deep self-understanding. Practical exercises extend into the smallest acts. Before responding to criticism, pause to ask, is this judgment about me or about the speaker's own struggle? Before reaching for indulgence, ask, will this choice honor my long-term values or only my short-term craving? Such pauses shift the arc of a day. Self-knowledge also nurtures resilience. When setbacks come, you know which parts of yourself can bend without breaking. Instead of being surprised by your vulnerabilities, you are familiar with them, and thus they lose power to overwhelm you. In daily mindfulness, even routine tasks become opportunities for self-discovery. Commuting, cooking, or listening can all reveal the patterns of thought that shape your inner world. The ordinary becomes sacred when approached with reflective awareness. From here, a deeper harmony emerges. Work is no longer only about productivity, but about purpose. Relationships are no longer only about attachment, but about growth. Solitude is no longer emptiness, but the fertile ground of clarity. To live Stoicism in daily life is not to renounce the world, but to engage with it more skillfully. It is to carry within you a steady center that no external turbulence can easily dislodge. This center is built one act of awareness at a time. The practices of journaling, reflective meditation, and emotional distance are not ends in themselves, but tools. Their purpose is to reveal you to yourself again and again, until self-knowledge becomes less an effort and more a natural rhythm of life. And so the Stoics remind us, wisdom is not a grand revelation but a daily cultivation. The power of self-knowledge grows not in the extraordinary, but in the ordinary, where choices accumulate and character takes shape. Here, philosophy touches the ground. Ultimately, to know yourself in daily life is to transform life itself. It is to replace reaction with intention, distraction with focus, and chaos with peace. This is not perfection, but practice, a journey measured not by arrival, but by the depth of awareness along the way. The lessons of self-knowledge do not remain buried in ancient manuscripts. They live on in the lives of those who faced unimaginable trials and yet emerged with clarity and strength. From emperors to prisoners, from philosophers to survivors, each reveals that to know oneself is to possess a power greater than circumstance. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, ruled during times of plague, war, and betrayal. Despite commanding armies and bearing the burden of empire, he did not record triumphs of conquest. Instead, he turned inward, filling his journals with reminders to remain humble, to govern himself before governing others, and to endure suffering with equanimity. His reflections were not written for history, but for survival. By examining his thoughts, Marcus discovered resilience. His empire may have stretched across continents, but his true achievement was mastering the empire within, the restless, fragile, and often deceptive mind that could destroy a man more quickly than any enemy. Centuries later, Nelson Mandela endured 27 years of imprisonment under apartheid. In confinement, stripped of freedom, dignity, and family life, he could have surrendered to bitterness. Instead, he deepened his understanding of himself, transforming his cell into a crucible of character. Mandela's strength was not only political strategy, but also inner clarity. He learned patience, forgiveness, and the ability to see beyond hatred. When released, he emerged not broken but refined, embodying the truth that self-knowledge nurtures the resilience to turn suffering into purpose. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, offered yet another testimony. Amid the horrors of concentration camps, he observed that those who endured were not the physically strongest, but those who could find meaning. By knowing their values and inner orientation, they preserved a freedom that no prison could take. Frankl later wrote that everything can be taken from a person except one freedom, the ability to choose one's attitude. This insight mirrors Stoic teaching. Circumstances are not fully ours, but our response is. Self-knowledge allows us to exercise this freedom wisely, even in darkness. These stories echo the Stoic conviction that wisdom is tested not in comfort, but in crisis. When fortune collapses, when the familiar is lost, it is the self that remains. If we know ourselves, we stand. If not, we shatter. The choice is silent, but decisive. History also shows how self-knowledge tempers leadership. Marcus Aurelius led with restraint rather than cruelty. Mandela sought reconciliation instead of revenge. Frankl guided others toward healing rather than despair. Each reveals that personal clarity radiates outward, shaping societies as well as individuals. But these are not only distant examples. In daily life today, the same principles apply. Whether navigating career challenges, relationship struggles, or inner doubts, the act of knowing yourself equips you to respond with wisdom rather than reaction. Modern culture often pulls us outward, toward screens, toward trends, toward constant comparison. In this flood, it is easy to forget the inner compass. Stoicism offers a way back, reminding us that the foundation of strength lies not in external validation but in inner clarity. When you know your values, decisions become lighter. You no longer hesitate endlessly, because your direction is guided by principles rather than shifting opinions. This saves energy and brings calm, as your choices reflect who you truly are. When you know your emotional patterns, relationships soften. You see anger before it grows, sadness before it consumes, pride before it blinds. By noticing these movements within, you create space for patience, empathy, and genuine connection. When you know your limits, work becomes sustainable. Instead of exhausting yourself in endless striving, you focus where you are strongest and accept where you are finite. The result is not weakness but endurance, the kind of steady progress that lasts. Stoic practices offer practical entry points. Begin with journaling, writing each day about your choices, your thoughts, and your reactions. Over time, patterns emerge, revealing the architecture of your mind. Awareness grows not in sudden leaps, but in steady chiseling. Meditation on impermanence also grounds you. By remembering that time is fleeting, possessions fragile, and life uncertain, you sharpen clarity about what matters. This practice does not create despair but gratitude, encouraging you to live intentionally rather than carelessly. The exercise of stepping back from emotion remains as relevant now as in ancient Rome. Before sending a message, before reacting to criticism, pause. See the emotion rising within you. Acknowledge it and ask, is this the action of my reason or my impulse? In that pause, freedom lives. The lives of Marcus, Mandela, and Frankl reveal that self-knowledge is never trivial. It is the root of endurance, the seed of transformation, and the quiet strength that allows a person to face suffering without being broken by it. Self-knowledge makes the difference between being consumed by hardship and being refined through it. The same truth applies to each of us today. In trials both large and small, it is the inner clarity we cultivate that determines how we rise, endure, and grow. From here, the invitation is simple yet demanding. Each person must turn inward, not once but continually. It is not enough to admire Stoic philosophy. One must embody it. Each decision, each reflection, each pause becomes an act of philosophy alive in the world. By doing so, we shape not only our own lives, but also the lives around us. A person who knows themselves radiates calm, steadiness, and clarity. They become an anchor for others, a quiet presence that steadies the storm without needing to control it. So the lesson of history and today converges. Whether emperor or prisoner, leader or ordinary citizen, the journey inward equips us for the journey outward. Self-knowledge remains the foundation of strength, resilience, and wisdom, as true now as it was 2,000 years ago. And in your own life, the path is open. Through reflection, through discipline, through daily mindfulness, you too can cultivate the clarity that guided Marcus, Mandela, and Frankl. The world outside may remain unpredictable, but the self within can become unshakable. To understand the vastness of the world, we must first return to the quiet center within. The Stoics remind us that wisdom, resilience, and peace do not come from controlling fortune, but from knowing ourselves. When we turn inward with honesty, we discover the strength to face outward challenges with clarity and calm. As you move through your own life, take a moment each day for reflection. Protect a few minutes of silence, write your thoughts, and watch how awareness deepens. This simple practice becomes the foundation of transformation. Thank you for joining us here at Stoic Dhamma. If today's journey inspired you, consider subscribing and leaving a reflection of your own. In our next video, we will explore a karma yoga Stoic mindset for selfless service and inner peace. Until then, may your path be steady and your heart at peace.
References 1. Aurelius M. 2002. Meditations, G. Long, trans. Dover Publications. Point 2. Epictetus. 2008, The Enchiridion. Cosimo Classics. Point 3. Seneca. 2010, Letters from a Stoic, R. Campbell, trans. Penguin Classics.